In the heart of contemporary Cairo, within a modest yet elegantly decorated living room, tension hung in the air. Lee, a young and beautiful recent graduate, sat nervously beside her father, Mahmud, as they awaited the arrival of her suitor's family. The room hummed with the chatter of relatives, but Lee's thoughts drifted, tangled in a web of excitement and unease. The sharp ring of the doorbell cut through the conversations. Mahmud stood, his face brightening. "They're here," he announced, moving towards the door. As the guests entered, Lee's eyes met those of Amir, her suitor, a well-dressed, charming young man. Accompanying him were his mother, Suair, and sister Dahlia. Suair's gaze was discerning, her smile a little too calculated, sending a shiver down Lee's spine. "Welcome, welcome," Mahmud exclaimed, embracing Amir before turning to greet Suair and Dahlia. "Please make yourselves at home." Polite introductions and small talk filled the room as everyone settled in. Lee exchanged a shy smile with Amir, who seemed genuinely enthralled by her. But it was Suair's piercing eyes that kept drawing Lee's attention. As they gathered around the coffee table, laden with delicacies, Mahmud initiated a conversation. "Amir, we've heard so much about your achievements. Lee is lucky to have caught your eye." Amir smiled humbly. "It is I who am lucky. Lee's grace and intelligence are what truly captivate me." Lee blushed, flattered yet uncomfortable. Her gaze met Suair's, who was studying her with unsettling intensity. "Your home is lovely, Mahmud," Suair interjected, her voice laced with a subtle condescension. "Lee must have grown up very happy here." Mahmud, oblivious to the undertone, nodded. "Indeed she has." As the conversation progressed, Suair's control over the gathering became increasingly evident. She dominated the discussions, often speaking on Amir's behalf or cutting him off. Lee noticed but remained silent, her unease growing. After some time, Mahmud brought up the engagement. "We are delighted at the prospect of this union. Lee, what do you say?" Lee hesitated, her eyes darting between her father, Amir, and Suair. "I am honored," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Suair leaned forward, her eyes locked on Lee. "We are thrilled, aren't we, Amir? Lee will make a perfect addition to our family." Amir nodded, though he seemed somewhat restrained under his mother's watchful gaze. As the evening wore on, Lee's discomfort deepened. Suair's every word and gesture felt like a quiet assertion of control, overshadowing Amir's presence. Later in the kitchen, Lee confided in her aunt Fatima. "Auntie, I feel uneasy about Suair. She seems controlling." Fatima waved her concerns away. "Oh dear, it's just wedding jitters. All mothers are protective of their sons. It's normal." Lee wasn't convinced, but she chose to remain silent. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, with the families agreeing on the engagement and discussing wedding arrangements. Suair's opinions on every detail were final, and even Mahmud seemed to defer to her. Late that night, after the guests had left, Lee lay in bed, her mind racing. She replayed the evening's events, her unease about Suair growing stronger. Yet a part of her wondered if she was overreacting, misinterpreting concern for control. Her mother, Samira, entered the room and sat at the edge of her bed. "Lee, you seem distant tonight. Is everything all right?" Lee turned to her, the floodgates opening. "Mama, I'm scared. Suair, she's so dominating. I felt like I was being scrutinized, not welcomed." Samira sighed, her expression softening. "My dear, marriage is about compromise and understanding. Maybe Suair is just protective of Amir. Give it time." Lee nodded, though her doubts lingered. As she drifted to sleep, her mind swirled with a mixture of fear and hope, unsure if she was stepping into a dream or a carefully veiled nightmare. The grand ballroom of the Marriott in Cairo was a spectacle of lights and opulence, filled with the joyous melodies of traditional Arabic music. Lee, draped in a stunning white gown, sat beside Amir, her husband-to-be, amidst a sea of congratulatory faces. The air was rich with the scent of jasmine and roses, yet Lee's heart was heavy, a sense of unease still lingering. Amir, looking dapper in his black tuxedo, leaned toward Lee, whispering, "You look breathtaking, Lee. I'm the luckiest man today." Lee forced a smile, her gaze drifting to Suair, who was orchestrating the event with an iron fist, ensuring every detail met her standards. Lee whispered back, "Thank you, Amir. Everything looks beautiful." As the evening progressed, the guests reveled in the festivities. Mahmud, beaming with pride, approached the newlyweds. Lee, Amr, everyone is praising this grand wedding. You two are a match made in heaven. Amr responded with a gracious nod. Thank you, uncle. We owe much of this to my mother's planning, Amr said, his voice laced with gratitude. As if on cue, Swear, overhearing the conversation, joined them, her tone thick with self-satisfaction. Indeed, she said with a smirk. A wedding like this is a once-in-a-lifetime event. It must be perfect. Lee remained silent, her discomfort growing as she felt Swear's presence overshadowing what should have been her and Amir's special day. As the night wore on, Dahlia, Amir's sister, approached the couple with a mischievous grin. Come on, Lee, let's show everyone how it's done. Let's dance, Dahlia urged, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Already feeling overwhelmed, Lee hesitated. Dahlia, I'm a bit tired. Maybe later? Dahlia's face fell for a moment before she persisted. Oh, come on, just one dance. It's your wedding day. Before Lee could respond, Swear interjected sharply. Lee, it's just a dance. Don't be a spoilsport. Feeling cornered, Lee reluctantly stood, her steps heavy as they made their way to the dance floor. The crowd cheered, but Lee's heart wasn't in it. She moved mechanically, her smile forced. Sensing her unease, Dahlia leaned in. Are you okay? She whispered. Lee nodded unconvincingly. Yes, just a bit tired, that's all. As the song ended, Lee excused herself, rushing back to her seat with uneven breaths. Amr, noticing her distress, quickly approached. Lee, are you all right? He asked, his voice full of concern. Before she could answer, Swear stormed over, fury flashing in her eyes. What was that, Lee? You embarrassed us in front of all our guests. Lee tried to explain, her voice trembling. I just felt a bit overwhelmed. Without warning, Swear raised her hand and slapped Lee across the face. The sharp crack echoed through the hall, silencing the music and stunning the guests into gasps. Lee clutched her cheek, tears welling in her eyes. Amr, frozen in shock, stared at his mother in disbelief. Mother, what have you done? He asked, his voice trembling with shock. Realizing the gravity of her actions, Swear stammered. I didn't mean to. It was just a moment of anger. Mahmud rushed over, his expression a mix of disbelief and fury. What is going on here? He demanded, turning to Swear with anger burning in his eyes. How could you, on her wedding day? Swear, now trying to compose herself, muttered, Mahmud, I lost my temper. It won't happen again. Though visibly upset, Mahmud turned to Lee, his voice softening. Lee, my child, sometimes in the heat of the moment we do things we regret. Swear didn't mean it. Lee looked at her father, hurt and disbelief clouding her eyes. How can you say that, Baba? She hit me on my wedding day. Amr, torn between his mother and his wife, remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. Lee's mother, Samira, approached, placing a comforting hand on her daughter's shoulder. Her voice was steady but firm. Mahmud, this is not acceptable. We need to talk about this, just not here, not now. The room hung heavy with tension, the once joyous atmosphere shattered. Lee, feeling humiliated and betrayed, stood up, her voice trembling but firm. Lee's new home, a spacious apartment in an affluent Cairo neighborhood, was far from what she had dreamed of. Instead of being filled with laughter and love, the walls echoed with constant demands and criticisms from her new family. One morning, as Lee prepared breakfast, Swear stormed into the kitchen, her tone as sharp as ever. Lee, why isn't breakfast ready yet? Amr will be late for work. Lee, exhausted from sleepless nights, responded softly. It'll just be a few more minutes, Mama Swear. Swear huffed in irritation. You need to wake up earlier. You're not a student anymore. You're a wife now. As Amr entered the kitchen, he noticed the tension. Good morning. What's smelling so good? He asked, oblivious to the atmosphere. Lee's making your favorite, fowl and tea, Swear quickly replied, her tone shifting to one of false cheerfulness. Amr smiled at Lee. Thank you, Lee. You're taking such good care of us. Lee forced a smile, her heart aching for a sign of support from her husband. After breakfast, as Amr left for work, Dahlia called out from the sofa. Lee, once you're done cleaning up, I need you to help me sort out my closet. It's a disaster. Already drained, Lee nodded silently. Her days had become a never-ending cycle of chores, with Swear and Dahlia treating her more like a servant than a member of the family. In the quiet of the afternoons, Lee found her only solace on the small balcony attached to her room. She would stand there, gazing out at the bustling streets below, longing for her former life. It was during one of these solitary moments that she made a quiet but firm decision. She began taking birth control pills, secretly purchased with the little money she had. The thought of bringing a child into this oppressive environment was unbearable. Lee's heart bled deeply, mourning the loss of her father, Mahmud, the pillar of her life. Without him, she felt utterly lost. After the funeral, as they returned to Amir's home, Suwair's sharp voice cut through the silence. Lee, life must go on. You should focus on your duties. Grieving won't bring your father back. For the first time, Lee found the strength to respond. He was my father. I need time to grieve. Amir, who had been silent all along, finally spoke up. Mother, please let her be. His sudden assertiveness surprised Swear, but she didn't argue further. That night in the solitude of her room, Lee made a decision that would change her life. She called her mother, her voice resolute. Mama, I can't live like this anymore. I want a divorce. Samira, on the other end, responded with a mix of sadness and relief. I've been waiting for you to say that, my child. You deserve happiness, and I'll support you every step of the way. Lee hung up the phone, a sense of determination rising within her. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, she felt a flicker of hope. The oppressive weight of her marriage was about to be lifted. In the modest but cozy living room of her mother's home, Lee sat with a determined look in her eyes. Across from her, Samira's face showed a mix of worry and support. Lee, are you sure about this? Divorce is a big step, Samira said gently. Lee nodded firmly. Yes, Mama. I can't live under Amir's and his mother's control anymore. I need to be free. Samira reached out, taking Lee's hands in hers. Then I'm with you every step of the way. The next day, Lee found herself in the stark, intimidating corridors of the family court. Her lawyer, Nadia, a middle-aged woman with a stern demeanor, briefed her on the proceedings. Lee, the judge will ask for your reasons for seeking a divorce. Be honest, but also be prepared for Amir to challenge your claims, Nadia advised. As they entered the courtroom, Lee's heart pounded. Across the room, she saw Amir, his face a mask of indifference. The judge, an older man with a stern expression, began the proceedings. Mrs. Lee, please state your reasons for seeking a divorce. Lee stood, her voice steady despite her nerves. Your Honor, I have been subjected to constant control and emotional abuse by my husband and his family. I seek freedom from this oppressive marriage. Amir rose to respond, his voice cold. Your Honor, these are baseless accusations. My wife is simply unwilling to adapt to our family's way of life. The judge looked at Lee. Do you have any evidence to support your claims? Lee hesitated, then spoke with quiet strength. I don't have physical evidence, but I've been living in a state of fear and unhappiness. The judge nodded, making notes. We will review the case and notify you of our decision. The legal battle was difficult. Amir's family tried to discredit Lee at every turn, but her resolve never wavered. In the end, the court granted her the divorce. Now free, Lee faced her future with a mixture of trepidation and hope. She knew the societal stigma attached to divorced women, but she was determined to rebuild her life. After several job rejections, Lee finally received a call from a publishing company. Miss Lee, we're impressed with your resume and would like to offer you a position as an editor, the voice on the phone said. Lee's heart soared. Thank you. I won't let you down. In her new job, Lee found a sense of purpose and independence she had never known. She thrived in her work, her creativity and intelligence finally being put to good use. Meanwhile, Amir remarried, but his new wife, Farida, was a force to be reckoned with. Unlike Lee, Farida dominated the household, often clashing with Swear and Dahlia. Lee heard of these developments through mutual acquaintances and couldn't help but reflect on the irony. As she sat in her modest but comfortable apartment, she looked out of the window, a sense of peace washing over her. Amir and his family, who once controlled her life, were now facing their own challenges. Lee had fought for her freedom and won. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Lee felt in control of her own destiny. Her journey had been difficult. but it had led her to a place of strength and self-discovery.